Very useful website for a lot of things, one of them being identifying where particular surnames may be from. We were doing this a little bit earlier, but does anybody have a surname they would like me to look up real quick?
Hackett?
Hackett. Sure.
Oh, there's a few.
That's not so bad. So this website, the data in this website is based on actual records from the 19th century in Ireland. So this tells us where people that were named Hackett that were heads of household at the time of Griffith's valuation in the mid-19th century lived. So this is based on actual information, actual data. It's a great website. I think for free you get 5 lookups a week. So you can look up 5 names a week for free. But you can subscribe to the website as well. It's like $10 a month. It's fairly inexpensive. The other great thing about this website is it will tell you what records are available for what areas. So once you finally do identify an area, you can come to this website and you can find out what records are available, which is going to be really useful and helpful. We can do more after we're done with the presentation. All right. So the purpose of this particular program today is to help you to try to find some information about your Irish ancestor online. One of the things that is a common misconception is that people think that they have to go to Ireland to find records for their Irish ancestor. This is really not always the case, especially if your ancestor emigrated, say, within the last 200 years. Then you're probably going to be able to find something online. It's not a guarantee, but there may be a good possibility of that happening. So this particular presentation is going to help you to try to find that information. Some of the resources I'm going to talk about are free. Actually, most of the resources I'm going to talk about are free, but some do require payment, and where they do, I'll let you know. If you see something on the screen that you want to remember, please feel free to take a picture with your phone. Back in the old days, we used to do handouts, but we don't do those anymore, so now people can just take pictures of the websites with their phones. The other thing is, if you have a question, please hold your hand up and I will get to it as we go along, because I know it's hard to try to remember things at the end. So here's the kinds of things that if you read Irish genealogy message boards on Facebook, these are the kinds of things you'll hear and that you'll see. A lot of people think that they have to go to Ireland to get information. People think that they need to go to Ireland and spend their vacation sitting in a dusty library not knowing what they're looking at. Other people think that only professionals can access this kind of information. And then there's the famous all the records burned, which is something we hear here in this country. So it's not like it's completely, just Irish, but it happens to be a pretty big myth that everything in Ireland burned, and that's just not the case. So we'll get to that in a minute. So the fact is that most of the basic resources that you might need to trace an Irish ancestor are going to be available somewhere online. And the good news is that most of them are free. So that's a really good thing. So, not only can you access these things for free, it does get complicated because not everything is under one roof. So it's not like Walmart. You can't just go there and get everything at the same place. You may have to go to different websites to find different things if you want to get them for free. But also consider, especially if you have a particularly difficult case, consider hiring a professional. The difference between what you do and what a professional does is that a professional spends hours and days and months doing it, and they're fast and they know where to go. So that's really the difference. But you are absolutely welcome to try it yourself, and you probably will have some success. So as far as the fire went and all the records burned, this is the facts about the one event that did take place. In 1922, there was a bombing of the Four Courts building in Dublin. This building was destroyed, and unfortunately, inside the building were housed some of these really basic records, including census records, which is something that we use a lot here in the United States and that we depend on. A little more than half of the existing Church of Ireland registers. So those are Protestant registers, and those were housed in the Four Courts building, and the ones that were there did not survive. Wills and probate documents. A lot of us did not have ancestors that were rich enough to leave a will, so maybe this isn't such a problem for us. And then pre-1900 documents from the legal courts. So there was a bunch of things that went up in flames, but things like the 1901 census, the 1911 census, those were fine. The Roman Catholic records were not affected. So we do have a good amount of information still available. So these are the basic resources that we can use to find Irish ancestors. And those consist of the Census Records 1901 and 1911, and now 1926, that was just released in April. The vital records of birth, marriage, and death. Those began for the whole country in 1864, which is way earlier than New York State. Roman Catholic parish records, those that exist. Land records. Cemetery records, such as they are. And also a resource called Ireland Reaching Out, Ireland XO, that I will talk about at the end of the presentation. So the bad news is that before we try to use any of these basic sources, we've got to have some basic knowledge. We cannot say, I'm looking for John Kelly, born in 1843, somewhere in Ireland, and go looking in the Roman Catholic parish records. Good luck. We really need to have some extra information. So we need more than a name, we need more than an approximate birth date, we need some supporting documentation to be able to do an effective search. The minimum amount that you will need is names of your immigrant ancestors' parents, including a mother's maiden name. So in other words, if you have John Kelly, born in 1846, and you have his father's name is John and his mother's name is Mary, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have Mary's maiden name. The approximate year of the ancestor's birth. Now, birth years are always approximate. There's no such thing as exact in these days. You could see your ancestor in a United States Census like in 5 or 10 different census years, and every single birth year will be different. But you need to have an approximate idea. An idea of the names of the ancestor's siblings would be great. So if you know that the ancestor had a brother or sister, several brothers, several sisters, any types of relatives, that's a really good bit of information to have. And then a county or a town name from a source in the immigrant ancestor's adopted home. That's always a good clue to have. So sometimes we find things like that on gravestones. Sometimes we find them in obituaries. Sometimes we find them in written material about our ancestor. But those are the kind of things that can be found in the country that they settled in. And that's going to be very important to look for. So we know this. Everybody knows this. Irish names can be very common. This is just a few statistics about just how common some of these names are. The 1901 census has over 4,000 John Murphys in it. A Griffiths valuation from 1850 shows almost 1,700 Michael Ryans as heads of household. 1880 births show 73 Patrick Connors born in that year alone. 1830 baptisms from the Catholic parish records show over 100 James Walshes. So you can see that you are going to need a little bit of extra information to be able to track down your ancestor. You need to have more than just a name and a date. So recognizing that there are barriers to successful research is the first step toward eliminating those barriers. And these are some of the things that happen when we go to start searching for our ancestors. People thinking that the spelling of their name has always been the same. Well, it may have always been the same, but it depends on who's writing it and who's hearing it. So, like I said earlier, I don't care if your name is Smith, you're going to find spelling variations. And if you happen to have one of those names that has many variations, then it's a good idea to make a list and to have that list handy for when you go searching. Names are common. We just saw that. Look for a Patrick Murphy on a ship's list, and I'll find you 500 that came in 1 year. Wrong dates. Birth years are always off. So if your ancestor has that their birth date is March 17th, 1856 on their gravestone, don't believe it. Be very skeptical. Relying too heavily on family stories. This one's a big one. Everybody grew up with, my dad said this, my grandfather said this. Our ancestors came from County Cork. Those are the kind of things that we grow up with, and we're heavily invested in those stories. But definitely be skeptical. It's kind of like a game of telephone. Whoever said it the first time said it to somebody who heard it and then repeated it a little differently, and then that person repeated it a little differently, and then that person. So it went on down the line. So we've started out maybe with something very specific, and what we've ended up with is just Ireland. So that's something to be informed about. Not having enough collateral information. We just talked about that. We need to have supporting information. One of the things that I commonly do when I'm researching people is I will go in and I will look for relatives for them. Particularly if the person that I'm researching died young or died in a situation where I can't get further information for him, I go and I look for brothers, sisters, somebody to hook to him. So that is often a very important part of my research. And then finally, unrealistic expectations. I can't tell you how many people have contacted me and said, I'm going to Ireland in 2 weeks, can you find my ancestors? And I'm like, I've been at this for 30 years and I still don't know where some of my people came from. So this is a process, it takes a while, don't expect it to be instant gratification. I think, unfortunately, as more and more things have come online, more people have come to expect fast service, things to be going quickly, to be able to go into Ancestry and find a tree that has your ancestors back to Brian Boru or whatever. But that's not realistic, so don't expect it to be. Expect it to take a long time. Sorry to be a wet blanket, but that's really the way it is. Okay, so before you try to do any research in Irish records, don't even think about looking at Irish records until you have done these things. You want to find your ancestor in every single document that you can in the country they settled in. Whether that's the United States, whether it's Canada, whether it's Australia, whether it's England, whatever country it is, you want to get as much paper about them as you can. You will need to have a good idea of your ancestors' fan club. Now in genealogy, the fan club stands for friends and family, associates, and neighbors. Because of course, no one lives in a vacuum. Everybody's got family, everybody's got friends, everybody's got associates. All of these people might provide you with vital clues, so pay attention to them. One thing that I've learned over the years as I've been doing this is that there's always a good chance that the ancestor's spouse comes from the same place that they did. So don't ignore the spouse. In general, I think recent immigrants tended to marry people who were either from the same place that they were or from fairly nearby. So that can provide a good clue. There's not going to be any document in Ireland that's going to tell you that John Murphy moved to Troy, New York. However, in Troy, New York, there might be a document that tells you that John Murphy is from County Westmeath. So it may work from the United States over to Ireland. It is not going to work in Ireland back to here. I would say the amount of times I've found someone in the United States mentioned in an Irish document, be it a document, a record, a newspaper, less than 1%. So very, very, very rare. All right, so now we're just going to go over the basic records just to get you a little bit more familiar with what's available and what kinds of information you can expect from them. So the first complete census for the country that's available is 1901. Now, a lot of us think, oh, my ancestor got here in 1860. That's not going to be any good to me. Well, you never know. Your ancestor may have left siblings behind that went on and had families, and those families might be able to be found in the 1901 and 1911 census. So don't discount it. Most of the 19th century census records for Ireland were either deliberately destroyed once their statistical value was mined out of them, or they were destroyed in the Four Courts bombing in 1922. There are small fragments that exist for random places, but there's almost not even enough worth it to look at. One thing that happened was when Ireland introduced an old age pension in the 19-teens, people had to prove how old they were in order to receive a pension. So what they did was they went back looking in those existing census records and they made reports for them. And you will find people claiming old age pensions from places in the United States. So that's something that happened. So that's possible to find information in that way. Again, it's a pretty small percentage. And if your ancestor left way before 1901, again, think about people with their surname maybe living in the same place where they lived. That might be related. So the census gives us some good information. It gives us the names of everyone living in the household. It gives their ages. It gives their religion. It gives whether they can read and write. It tells us if they can speak Irish and English, or just Irish or just English. It gives us their occupations, their marital status. So basic census information. There's also pages that tell you what type of dwelling the people were living in. Tells you how many rooms it had, tells you what it was made of, tells you what kinds of farm outbuildings they may have had, a pigsty, a barn, that kind of thing. So it's got some interesting information about it. 1911, we have a little bit more detail, tells you how long a couple has been married, tells you how many children a woman has had. So both of these can be very good information that can be useful. And here's one of those old age pension samples. This one's actually for a woman that lived in Watervliet, New York, which is just outside of Albany. So she was claiming a pension from Watervliet, and she sent to Dublin, and someone went through the old census records and found her and made this report. And of course, these were done in the 19-teens, which was before the Four Courts fire in 1922. So that's why these still exist. Yes?
I guess it's obvious, but so people who lived in the United States could claim pension back in Ireland, even if they were living here?
I guess if you were so motivated, and maybe if you, I'm not sure what that meant in terms of citizenship, but of course she was a woman, so she wasn't a citizen anyway. So, well, she was not. This was before 1919. Women were not granted citizenship until after 1919. So it could be that was what the situation was, but I do see men as well applying. Again, it's not a very large population, but some people do.
Interesting.
So the newly released 1926 census just came out in April. This is available online. If you Google 1926 Ireland census, it will come right up and you can search it. Now, the reason why it was taken in 1926 is because in 1921, when it would have been taken, was when the Civil War was going on. So they were not about to take a census while the war was going on, and by the time the dust settled, it was 1926, and so they decided at that time to take a census. And that's what this census is. Unfortunately, it's just the Republic, so Northern Ireland is not included in this census, just the Republic. But Northern Ireland is included in 1901 and 1911. And all three of the censuses are available at the National Archives of Ireland website. So you can go to the National Archives of Ireland website and you can look at any of the census records for free. So now the next record that could be of good importance to anyone researching are the vital records. Vital records are named that because they record vital events in people's lives, their births, their deaths, their marriages. We have those here in this country. When we have a baby, we have a birth certificate. When we get married, we have a marriage certificate. So these are the Irish equivalent. These are available for the entire country. So both the Republic of Ireland and what is now known as Northern Ireland, because of course it was all one country until 1922. So these records are available 100% free on the Irish Genealogy website. There is a 100-year privacy law in place, so we cannot look at anything that is newer than 100 years. Except for, I think it's 75 for deaths and marriages, and then 100 for births. Oh, here it is. Okay, I have it all in here. So, for the vital records, they all start in 1864. So every marriage, every birth, every death. And in general, compliance is pretty good. If you go in and you look for somebody that was born in 1864, 1865, you're probably going to find it. Not true in New York State. If you go in looking in 1880 looking for a birth, you're not going to find it. But the compliance here was pretty good. The privacy laws are births 100 years. So the most recent births that we can look at are about 1925. Marriages 75 years, and deaths 50 years. Compliance is good. One thing about you'll find with the birth dates is that sometimes they may be fudged. And again, we're talking our birth dates have to be looked at with a grain of salt. What happened with birth dates is you had a certain amount of time to get down to the registrar to register your birth. Well, maybe it wasn't your first priority and you didn't get down there within the time allotted. And so if you didn't get down there within the time allotted, then you would be fined. So it was easier to just make up a birth date that was within the allotted time period. And a lot of people did that. So a lot of times you will find dates of baptism that are well before dates of birth. But that's normal. That's normal. And in general, the best date of birth is going to be the date of baptism. That's going to be the closest. Yes?
What do you mean by compliance in this?
Well, we all know what happens when new laws come into existence.
Yeah.
We don't always comply when they
So
start.
you're talking about the residents might not have.
That's correct.
participated.
I find in Ireland that the compliance is pretty good. Tended to be better in more urban areas. In your rural areas, not so much, because you would have had to go maybe a far distance to register your event. So, but in general, I find that the compliance in Ireland is pretty good, as opposed to other places.
Thank you.
So what happens if your ancestor was born before 1864? Well, then you're going to be relying on parish records. So that will be all that you have available to you. So if your ancestor is born after 1864, then you have a good chance of finding both a civil birth record and a parish baptism record. So that's a really good thing. And these records on the Irish Genealogy website are totally free to access for anyone at any time. So you can go to that website and you can look to your heart's content. This is a sample birth from 1888. All the births for a particular time period are listed on one page. There's about 10 per page. They're not in any alphabetical order. They are in registration date order, actually. And what you will get with them is you will get the birth date of the child. Again, remember, we don't know whether that's true or not. The place where the child was born, the child's name, the name of the father and his residence, the name of the mother with her maiden name, the occupation of the father, and a name of a person that registered the birth. So a lot of times it is either the mother or the father, but sometimes it's a midwife or someone else that was present at the birth. So that's also an important thing to note when you look at a birth record. A marriage record is probably the most useful of the three because it involves two parties, the two parties getting married. So this gives us the date of the marriage, the names of the parties getting married, the bride and the groom. This one happens to give the exact ages of the parties, but a lot of times what you'll see is it says full, which just means that they are of legal age to marry. It doesn't give you a specific age. Yes?
Was that in County Cavan, do you know?
I can't tell. This is like from a client from a while ago, so I don't really remember 100%. It tells you where the marriage occurred, and this one actually happened to occur in a registry office in Lurgan, and that's why it's before 1864. It will give you the conditions of the parties, bachelor or spinster. So bachelor meaning unmarried male, spinster meaning unmarried female. Then it will give you the addresses, or it'll actually give you the occupations of both, and in this case they were both weavers. It will give you the addresses of both, where they lived, the townland they lived in. And then it will give you the names of their fathers. It does not give you the names of their mothers. It will give you the names of their fathers, and it will give you their father's occupations. In some records, you will see alive or dead after the father's name, sometimes, but it's not uniform. And then this is a death record. Death records are probably the least useful of the three records. What it gives you is the date and place of the death, the name of the person deceased, their gender, their age, again, approximate, their occupation, what the cause of death was, always interesting, and then the informant. So the informant in the death record is very important because it's usually the only clue you're going to get as to who this person is. Sometimes you will get a relative and it will be named as a relative, son, wife, etc. Other times you'll get someone that's not familiar to you at all, and there will be no relationship specified. And still other times will be someone that died in the workhouse, and it's a workhouse employee who's the informant. So those are the worst ones. So then, the Roman Catholic parish records. These were not affected by the Four Carts bombing. They had nothing to do with that. That being said, there's no such thing as a complete set of anything when it comes to the Roman Catholic parish records. They are all over the place in terms of when they start for each parish. It's going to be different. That's where John Grenham's website comes in very handy. Because if you learn the Catholic parish that your ancestors may have come from, then you can go on John Grenham's website and you can look up and see when the records start. I just had one recently where I've been working on somebody and I found the parish and I went and I looked and they didn't start until well after the people I was looking for were born. So that was a disappointment. But it sure helps then going and looking in the parish records and not finding anything and wondering if it's you that's doing something wrong or what's going on. It's good to be informed. So the most complete collection will be found at the National Library of Ireland website. This collection started in 1949. People went around the country filming records from different parishes, and those microfilms were deposited at the National Library. People were able to go there and do research using these microfilms. In 2015, that collection was placed online after being scanned. So the scans were placed online. They are freely available to anyone that wants to use them by going to the National Library of Ireland website. That being said, the collection that's on the library website is not indexed. You have to know the parish. Then when you do know the parish, you have to go through page by page, which isn't as horrible as it sounds, but it is still pretty arduous. Just after those records were published in 2015, volunteers from Ancestry and from Find My Past went through and indexed them. So there is an index to these records available on Ancestry and also on Find My Past. That being said, neither of them are very good. You can look people up, but maybe you'll find them, maybe you won't. It takes a great deal of finagling. Ancestry, as we know, is a pay website. A lot of people use it for free in their local libraries. That's something you could take a look at. Find My Past is a UK-based website that is also a pay site. But I use both indexes. Most of the time I use Find My Past, but neither one of them are perfect. It's free to use the NLI website, so if you know the parish, then you can use the National Library website and hopefully find your person. Mostly what you're going to find in these collections are baptisms and marriages. There are a few burials, but burials are really not very prevalent in Catholic records. It's not something that the church has kept track of, really. A few did. It was more a Protestant thing to keep track of the burials. So here's a baptism record from 1850 from the NLI collection. This one's really neat. You can read it. Not all of them are like this, but this one looks halfway decent. And then here's a marriage one, not so great, 1824. A lot of eye strain involved there. The good thing about looking at records on the National Library website is that when you're scrolling through the pages, it tells you in the corner of the image what months and years you're on. So you don't have to look at the page to be able to figure that out. You can look at the little thing in the corner. So that can be really helpful. So then there is another collection on the Irish Genealogy website. We've already seen this website. This is the website for the vital records. But there is a collection of church records on this Irish Genealogy website that you can look at and search. It's only certain dioceses on here, though. Those are going to be the Diocese of Kerry, the Diocese of Cork and Ross, Dublin City, and Church of Ireland records for County Kerry, County Carlow, and Dublin City. Very, very random. And this is one of the issues with doing Irish research, is that there's no uniform place to find all this stuff. It's very hit or miss. But I guess this is what we get for free. We have to kind of search it out, dig it out. This website only has transcriptions. It does not have pictures. Yes.
Is there work going on in Ireland to improve that?
No. You get what you get. It's here. It's here. So I don't think we can improve on here. No, there's no central entity. The central entities do what they do. So the archive does one thing, the library does another thing. It's all over the place, and we're not done yet. So this is for those particular places. So if you're researching Kerry ancestors, this is your place.
Lisa,
Yes.
is there typically only one parish in a city?
No.
No?
No.
Sorry.
Cities are going to have maybe up to 10, depending on the city. And also, parishes are not generally like St. Mary's, St. Michael's. They have names of places. So a particular parish will have a place name. And it also has several alternate names. So depending on what website you look at, you might be looking at a different name for the parish.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
So when you say parish, are you referring to a church parish or a hamlet parish?
I'm talking about in this case, I'm talking about a Roman Catholic parish.
Okay.
So the area that encompasses a single Roman Catholic parish. That being said, people jumped all over the place. They didn't stay in one parish. They might have been in different, especially in rural areas. And then also there's the county borders to think about. Most people didn't, they just ignored county borders. They came and went as they pleased. So this is a sample from the Irish Genealogy collection of a record from Kerry. And this is a transcription. So this is not going to be the actual picture of the record. It's just a transcription. So then there's Roots Ireland. Roots Ireland is a collection of records from Roman Catholic parishes plus other records, but this has a completely different origin. So in the 70s and 80s, people started to get interested in researching their Irish heritage. And in an effort to make that easier for people, there was an organization that got together and founded heritage centers in each county. And it was the responsibility of these heritage centers to go around to the different parishes in their county and film and transcribe records into a computer database. So they did that. So some of the records in here are overlapping what's in the National Library collection. Some are unique. So again, it gets more confusing. This is a website that has the data that was collected in the 70s and 80s, and it is in transcription form. So there are no images here, just transcriptions that were done in the 70s and the 80s. A subscription to Roots Ireland gets you access to those transcriptions. And you will find some unique records in here that are not available on the National Library website. It just depends on what your parish is. This is a church marriage record that's a transcribed record from the Roots Ireland website. It will give you the information that was available when the person transcribed this. These transcriptions happened in a local area with people that were familiar with local place names and local surnames. So this one might be a little bit better than, say, an Ancestry one, because who knows where someone from Ancestry was doing the transcribing. But these people were at least local, so they may have had a little bit more knowledge of the area they were working in. All right, so that takes care of church records, and it's confusing. Absolutely is it confusing, 100%. Sometimes when we're looking for a church record, it's possible or it's probable to look at 4 different sites to be able to find it. And even then, you may not find it. So it is definitely, it's definitely not ideal, but it's what we have. So it's better than nothing. All right, so land records, one of the realities that we deal with in Ireland is that most of our ancestors were not people that owned property. Otherwise, if they'd owned property, they probably would have stayed there. But they did not own property. They came to the United States. They went to other countries because they had a better possibility of owning property elsewhere. Ireland was locked in a landlord system that had been going on for hundreds of years. And the deadlock was finally broken in the 1870s, 1880s, but by that time, a lot of people had left. But what we have for land records, one of the most basic, is called Griffith's valuation. This was a survey that was taken in the mid-19th century that was, of course, meant for the objects of taxation. What else do they take surveys for? So the whole idea was to take information, make maps, and do all kinds of things to make the government aware of what kind of land was out there, who was living on it, what they were doing with it, how much they could be taxed. And we're talking taxing by land occupiers, not just landowners. So land occupiers were taxed for these properties. And what Griffiths does is it lists our land occupiers. Yes.
Were landowners and tenants both charged in some cases at
Yes.
the same time?
Yes. Yes. So a land occupier would be someone that was literally living on the land, whether they owned it or not. And a lot of our ancestors fall into this category. They fall into the fact that they were occupying sometimes small plots of land, sometimes larger plots of land. So what Griffiths does is it shows us the land occupiers, the heads of the household. So most of the people that are listed in Griffiths' valuation are males, because those were the heads of household. Sometimes you will find females. When you find females, they tend to be widows. But they would have been the person who was in charge or the person who was the head of the household of the occupied piece of property. What it includes is the names of over 1 million land occupiers. It is possible to find your ancestor in this set of records, but you have to know where they were living. You have to know that. If you don't know that, you have no chance. And especially if they have a common name, it'll be really hard to tell. The only thing that Griffiths shows us is it shows us the name of the person, the size of the plot he or she was occupying, what types of things were on it, like a house, a garden, outbuildings, whether it was just a piece of land. It gives the amount of acreage, and it gives the value, so how much it was worth. And then it will also give us the name of the person to whom the occupier was paying their rent. Sometimes this is the actual landowner, other times it's a middleman, sometimes it was a sublease, but all of that is in there. It's just up to us to interpret it and figure it out. This is another set of records that's available for free at several places. The most popular place to find it is the Ask About Ireland website. There you will be able to access all of the records for free, the actual documents of the valuation as well as the maps that go with it. So one of the cool things about this set is that not only can we find our ancestor in the record, but we can also pinpoint exactly where that ancestor was living in the 19th century. So if you're going to Ireland and you can find your ancestor on Griffiths, you can go to the maps and you can find the plot of land they were living on. Now, one of the times that I went, I had someone take me to the property that Margaret Pinder was living on. It was a B&B person, people that we were staying with. And they said, oh, I showed them the old map, I showed them the new map, which you can get easily from this website. And they said, oh, I know where that is, I'll take you out there. And so they did. So that's an extremely moving experience. If you can have that, you can do that using these maps. And that's something that's pretty unique to Ireland. Don't have that a lot in a lot of other places. One of the things that's available if you are researching someone in the north, Griffiths was revised every few years. So people would go through and they would go to the properties and they would say, okay, who's living here now? We're going to make the revisions. We've got these big books. We're going to make the changes. They were crossed out in different color pen and new people were written in. These books exist for the entire country. However, they're only online for the north. So if you have an ancestor that lived in the north, it's possible to trace that piece of land from the 1850s up through the 1920s using these revision books. So that's a really great opportunity. If you have a person that lives in the Republic, you have to go to Dublin to do this at the valuation office. But it's still possible to do. An earlier land survey called the Tithe Allotment was taken in the 1820s and the 1830s. This was meant to support the Church of Ireland. So you can imagine how popular that was. Mm-hmm. It was not as comprehensive as Griffiths. So in order to be included in this survey, you had to be an occupier of 1 acre of land or more. And of course, a lot of our people were not. It also excludes people in urban areas. So if you were living in a town or a city, you're not going to be in the tithe. So it's harder to find people in the tithe than it is in Griffiths. But it can be useful for putting people in a time period when there are fewer parish records that exist. And again, these are available for free on the National Archives of Ireland website and also at familysearch.org. And here's a sample of a tithe record. Similar to Griffiths, a little bit less information on it than Griffiths. Cemetery records, going to be quick because there's not many of them. The actual estimation is that less than 1% of the population is represented in a cemetery record somewhere. So, one of the things that people think about is that they're going to go to Ireland and look for their ancestor's grave. Well, if there hasn't been anyone there to tend to it in the last 150 years, it's probably not there anymore. And also the fact that most people could not afford a headstone. So there's very likely not going to be a headstone at all. As I mentioned earlier, the Catholic Church did not keep track of its burials. A few of the more affluent or urban parishes may have, but for the most part, they did not. You will find burial records more in Protestant records. There's also sources like Find a Grave and Billion Graves to look at just to see if there may be something randomly out there. I find them from time to time, but usually it's for people that have died in the last 50 years or so. This is a sample burial record from County Down. Just tells the name of the deceased and the church they were buried in. So we're going to wrap up with a mention about this website, Ireland XO. It's also called Ireland Reaching Out. This website was set up specifically to help people who were coming from different countries to try to find their Irish ancestor. It consists of local volunteers in Ireland So if you can identify the area that your ancestor came from, you can go to this website and you can find a volunteer in that area who will hopefully be willing to help you. The thing with this website is that some places have very active volunteers, other places have none. So it really just depends on the place where you're going. But there's a lot of stories and testimonials of people that have used the services of these volunteers. They are people that will meet you when you're over there. They will take you around to different places that might have played a role in your ancestor's life. I've had clients that have used the services from this website and been very, very satisfied. So again, it just is going to depend on the area that you're interested in and if there are volunteers there to help. It's all kinds of people that are helping, and I think it's actually more and more people every day. So when it first started out, there may not have been as many people, but now I think there's more people, and as more people find out about it, then more people will get on board. There's a message board section where you can ask questions, so that's also a possibility. And it's really can be a very rewarding experience for people. And then just a couple of other websites that might be worth mentioning. For Northern Ireland research, the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland has a very good website. They have some excellent records that are available. That's where you'll find those valuation revision books on that website. If you're going to be in Belfast, Prony is well worth a visit. For basic Irish genealogy how-tos, there's a website called the Irish Genealogy Toolkit that will tell you things like what's a civil parish and what is a registration district and what are the registration districts. It will answer basic questions about those kind of subjects. And then for Irish names that we just looked at, John Grenham, this is a great resource for finding basic information about your Irish surname, where you might find it in the country, and also for locating records. So say you find out that your ancestor came from a specific parish in County Cavan, you can go to John Grenham's website and you can see what's available for that parish. He will tell you the comprehensive list. He can tell you when the baptism and marriage records start. He can tell you where they're available online. So it's a very good website for figuring those kinds of questions out. All right, now that you're all stunned into silence, anybody got any questions? Yes.
Do you specialize in Irish genealogy?
Yes.
And what, is it because of your own background, or?
Yeah, actually, I started in the 70s. My dad started.
Wow.
And I picked it up in the mid-90s, and I've been doing it for 30 years.
So things have changed a lot over
They have. They have changed a lot. For the good, thankfully. Because when my dad started, he placed ads in Irish newspapers. And he had a few people reply to those ads. And I was able to meet a few of those people in the 90s. So that was a really cool experience. But yeah, way different. Yes.
What about Tipperary, Ireland? Are there specific records for that area?
Absolutely. Hundreds. It would depend on what you're looking at.
But it's a long way.
You're right, it is. Yeah, there's many. You would need to know a specific place in Tipperary. It's one of the bigger counties. Yes.
Do they still have information at Trinity College?
I've never used anything at Trinity College, so I don't really know what they would have there.
In Japan? It was probably absorbed in the rest of the...
Yeah, I don't know. I've not heard of anything from there, so. There is, Mike mentioned it at the beginning of the program, the Epic Museum in Dublin. If you're ever in Dublin, they provide a genealogy service for you. You can go in there and you can make an appointment with a genealogist. It's like a 60-minute session or something like that. You can book it before you go. And you can go in and you can talk to a genealogist. My advice would be to have as much information as you can possibly can before you go in and do it. Because if you go in and say, I'm looking for John Kelly, born in 1846, they're just going to laugh at you. Well, they might not laugh, but they're going to be like, oh, this is going to be the easiest 60 minutes in the world, because they won't be able to find anything. Anybody else got any questions? Yes?
Have you ever used ship manifest records to try to determine, to go backwards? I know you said that's not generally the way to go, but...
Ship manifests and their usefulness are completely dependent on what year. So a ship manifest from the 1920s is going to give you way more information than a ship manifest from the 1820s. So generally, 1890 forward is going to be better for a ship manifest. Anything before 1890 is just going to say John Murphy, age 42, from Ireland, a laborer. So really won't give you any kind of information at all. It can be very difficult to determine just who your ancestor is on a ship manifest unless they're traveling with family that you can identify. Single people, impossible, pretty much. Anybody else? Do you have one here? Yes.
The Ireland XO, the volunteers, do they only help you if you going there, or will they help you?
They will help you online, so you can send a question, and if there's a volunteer for that area, someone will answer you. And a lot of times they will go and they will do research for people, so you never know what you're going to get. Anybody else got questions? Yes.
What's been your most amazing discovery over the years?
I've had a lot of them. I don't know. It's hard to say. I guess in terms of Irish stuff, I don't know. I mean, I'm always honestly surprised at some of the things that I can find. Especially particularly with people that have very common names. I'm surprised at the things that I can find. I mean, I've found things of people that were, going to get an inheritance in Ireland and lived in the United States, and no one in the family ever knew about it. Just kind of things like that. I mean, I know it's kind of boring. Honestly, the most interesting thing I've ever discovered was that my father's uncle had a family and then abandoned that family and went and had another family and then abandoned that family. So that was one of the more interesting things, and he was one of the Irish people. So that was a DNA thing, though. Anybody else? Any questions?
Very nice.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, my father was born in 1909. He never had a birth certificate because he was born at home. And when he went to join the military in 1927, they used his baptismal certificate as his proof. And my mother, who was born in 1921, again, did not have a birth certificate. But when during World War II, she was actually hired by the government. The doctor that delivered her, did a delayed birth certificate.
Yes.
The military used that.
Yes. So which country were they born in?
The U.S.
Okay. Yeah.
My father, Wisconsin.
Yes.
My mother, Arkansas.
Ireland, like I said, the compliance is much better. In the U.S., not so much. As a matter of fact, in the state of New York, the registration of vital records began in 1880. Compliance was so terrible that in 1913, the government said, okay, people, you better start complying or you're going to go to jail or be fined. So generally, compliance is not great until 1913. So yeah, and even after that, but 1913 is generally the cutoff date for New York. But in other states, records didn't even start being kept until after 1900. So, yes?
Entry points from 1820 till like 1860. Entry points into the U.S. We have a relative, it appears that they came in through Canada into northern New York State. But I know there was also an entry point on the coast of Maine, Pasco Bay area. And then what was the most common place for Irish immigrants coming to the U.S.?
New York.
New York primarily.
Always New York. But there was Boston, there was Baltimore, there was Philadelphia, there was New Orleans, there was the West Coast, San Francisco. In Canada, I think like when we think in terms of entry points, we're thinking about that with modern thoughts. There was no border, it was porous, people came and went. Coming into Canada, they would have come into New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, St. Lawrence, Montreal. There's no records of anyone crossing the border until 1895. And then Canadian shipping lists are very few and far between. Very few, even worse than the United States ones, which are bad. Anybody else got any questions? Well, thank you. Oh, yes, one more.
I was just gonna comment on the birth date issue.
Yeah.
I'm on Family Search and I see some of the census records.
Mhm.
And that's why I take the census records with a grain of salt.
Sure.
Because I see that they're estimating the people's birth dates, so they're often off a year or two.
Sure.
And also, I've seen some records where it appears that the census taker is fairly literate. So that's where you get a lot of the misspellings too of people's names.
And you don't know who's giving the information for the census? Could be a neighbor. Could be like a 5-year-old child. You know, we don't know who's giving the information, so it's only as good as who's giving the information. Yes.
And it doesn't matter so much to them. In my experience, I went 2 years ago and I went to find my my paternal people, my girls. So I go into a bar, MCGIRL.
Mm-hmm.
I spell it UIRL. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm sure we're not related because we spell it differently. And she goes, IRL, UIRL, URL. She goes, we're all the same. There's only 2 families.
Yeah, she's right. She's right. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people have to get over, especially people that are beginners. You've got to get off the spelling thing, because spelling is 20th century. You know, it's not. Spelling was not uniform. And if you think surnames are bad, you just wait till you get into place names. Nothing is spelled the same way twice. It is insane. So a lot of people will like go to the cemetery and they'll be like, oh, look, there's a town on my ancestor's gravestone. Well, just try to find it on a map. That's really the way it is, unfortunately. But that's what we do all day long, is look up names and try to spell them. Yes?
Just briefly, you touched on graves being hard to utilize. Is that true as it is in some other countries? They recycle the graves, and can you say anything about how that works?
Well,
in Ireland?
Obviously, we're talking about a really small country, and you know, places would have to be used. You know, grave sites would have to be used again, because we're not talking about a place that has a lot of land, not like the United States. So you know, there may be people buried in old graves. A lot of graveyards are abandoned. They're no longer taken care of. So it's just a kind of situation where we're, you know, when we want to go visit our ancestors here in the United States, we go down to the cemetery, we know right where they're buried. But of course, our country's a lot newer than Ireland. So that's one of the things that we've kept track of a little bit better. But over there, you know, people left a long time ago. So if there was no one there to tend to the grave, then it really would have just been fallen into disrepair.
So if a grave was going to be reused and they removed the headstone, did they also remove the remains or just put a new body in it very
Good
close to
question.
the...
I don't know the protocol. I don't know.
Remember, they did start using cement to put.
Right, and the chances are they probably wouldn't have had a headstone to begin with. So a lot of the older ones wouldn't have.
Just wrap those bodies, drop to the ground.
Anybody else got any questions? Trying to remember, there was a point I was going to make and I can't remember what it was, of course. In my head and out of my head. Yeah, so I'm here if you have any questions. Please come up. I've got some cards if anyone wants one. Thank you so much for everybody to come. I'm glad to see everybody, and this is a great crowd. Fantastic.